Hello everybody. Today we are going to be talking about Chapter 6 of Rollo Tomassi's Rational Male Volume 2, Preventive Medicine. I decided to change around the title and I'm going to go back and change a lot of the thumbnails for this series because I have the feeling that a lot of people who have seen the thumbnails for this series or the titles of this series don't realize that Preventive Medicine is Rollo Tomassi's second Rational Male book. And so I'm going to try and change that. I got a very funny comment from a gentleman on Minds who later deleted it, which I'm really sad about because I didn't screenshot it to save it. Mostly he had thought that I was doing a book review on preventive medicine, like medicine that you can take preventively. And he was very disappointed to see what he refers to as I think it was something like a feminist rant. And the really sad thing is, the quote that he's referring to at, the timestamp he's referring to was a quote that I took directly out of this book. So I looked at it and was like, well, maybe it would be good for people to know that this is another Rational Male book because there seems to be some confusion there. So I'm changing everything around. It's going to take a little while because I've got to change all the thumbnails, but I'm going to do that and hopefully it's not too confusing for everybody. For those of you who have been following me through Preventive Medicine, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm just going to start writing Rational Male Volume 2 instead of trying to hope that people guess what I'm talking about. It's my hope that in the future red pill men will make the necessary interventions and apply what they've learned from their unplugging and red pill truths in general towards their sons and daughters, as well as other men they know or are related to. He wrote that, and I agree. It's my hope that this happens too. I think the more people learn how to... Cat. Buddy, here's the door tax. You want to go through the door, you have to say hello to the camera. I think... Okay. I think that the more people learn how to... The better people understand their sexuality, the better people understand what's driving their sexuality, the more likely people in general, men and women both, are going to be to make good decisions in their lives regarding their sexuality, regarding their relationships. And so his hope is a hope that I share. I hope that eventually we'll get to the point that people have a clearer understanding of what it is that drives them and are able to make better decisions that will take them closer to getting what they actually want. It's not that you're hopeless, it's that you lack the insight at this point to see that you can create hope in a new system, one in which you have more direct control over. This is something he wrote about in his first book, and I think it's very important to note. A lot of guys, when they first encounter the red pill, they have this very disappointed period that they go through where it's like, oh my gosh, I've been used, I've been lied to, women aren't what I thought they were, and they're very sad, they're very depressed about it, and it's a very depressing time that men do transition through. I don't think I've seen anybody who's encountered the red pill, had it slap them in the face and been like, oh, okay, well, whatever. There is no, well, whatever kind of with this. There's this period where you have to traverse, depression, sadness, disappointment, frequently a lot of anger because you've been lied to, and it is natural to feel angry when you've been lied to. The thing is, that doesn't mean it's hopeless, and I think that's something important that people often forget that. You have a lot more control because now that you know the truth, now that you have a lot more situational awareness, you can make decisions that actually affect things. You can kind of control your own path in life as opposed to just kind of being the victim of circumstances that seem unpredictable and outside of your control. So that's very important, and I really want to emphasize that for people because I think that's something that men discover later on after they've had that initial shock of the red pill and then the resulting depression and anger. At some point they start to realize, okay, I'm not powerless in this whirlwind that I've been thrust into. I can actually do things to make my circumstances better and to live a happy, fulfilling life. And that's important. Most critics of this assessment of how either sex interprets and considers love tend to blow past this part. They oversimplify my meaning and sputter out something to the effect of, That Tomassi guy thinks that women can't ever really love men. What preposterous crap. Well, the really funny thing that I've encountered... Catfight. The really funny thing that I've encountered has not been critics of the idea saying women can't really love. It's been men who believe in the idea who are like, oh, well, this just means that women can't really love. They oversimplify it dramatically. They completely lose the nuance and the meaning. And then they walk away with this idea that I have seen on the internet multiple times that women are simply not capable of love, which if we are not capable of love, if I'm not capable of love, then I don't know what it is that I've been experiencing for the last 10 years with my husband. But, it's been pretty nice, so I'll just go with that. For all the OMG, I can't believe this red pill asshole thinks women can't really love men misdirection, I should point out that well-intentioned men, especially the newly red pill, are often guilty of similar oversimplification. Okay, so he's seen it too. Good. I've seen it kind of a lot. I've seen kind of a lot of men who think that women aren't capable of love. And they're wrong, and if you try to point that out to them, they say that you're some woman who just doesn't listen to what Rollo has to say. It's not like I read his books or anything. And again, it's not a right or wrong way of loving. It's a lack of recognizing there is a difference in men and women's concepts of love and being on the punishing side of that lack. Most men will want to apply their concepts of honor or justice in assessing how right men's idealistic love is, while women will still see the inherent value of loving what a man is as a prerequisite for loving who a man is. And this is one of the things, I'm really glad he wrote this chapter because I've always struggled with this concept in the red pill, this idea that women love men differently than men expect to be loved. Obviously, I'm not a man, so I don't inherently grasp what it is that men are seeking. And I also look at my relationship with my husband and think, isn't this the kind of love that I've always seen defined when people talk about love? Is it conditional? Is my love to my husband conditional? Well, initially it was. I will say this. Initially, my love for my husband was very conditional. Was he smart enough? Was he handsome enough? Was he this enough? Was he that enough? Was he strong enough? Was he brave enough? I was measuring him on 100 different levels, and I was extremely cautious of him. I was extremely wary of him, and at points I was so guarded around him that I almost seemed a little bit aggressive at times. I was extremely distrustful. The closer he got to the point at which I knew that he was the one I wanted for certain, the more guarded and the more suspicious I became of him, and the more critical I became of him. I don't think I was shit testing him necessarily, but when men talk about shit tests and how when a woman shit tests you, it's kind of a good sign because it shows she's interested, I think they're onto something, because the closer he got to me and the more I liked him and the more I realized that I really liked him, the more just absolutely wary, distrustful, and guarded I became around him, which doesn't make a lot of sense. It makes a ton of sense from a female perspective. It's like, okay, I'm really close to just letting this guy in and letting him have everything here, but I don't want to let him in and let him have everything unless I know 100% that he's the one I want to be doing that. So it makes perfect sense on that angle. But it's still a little weird because we were friends and we were getting closer and we were becoming increasingly close in our friendship, and I was becoming increasingly distrustful of him on some level, which was a very unusual level because I trusted him as a friend, but there was this other level of evaluation that was going on, which was a very separate and different thing. And I say all this because once we hit that point, once he went over that threshold where it was like, okay, I have determined what he is, and I have determined that this what is valuable enough for me to give myself over to. And maybe this is the deep conversion idea that Tomassi and others have talked about. At that point, I was fully willing to fall completely in love with who he was and to love him for who he was. And ever since then, my love for my husband has been a matter of who he is, his personality, his spirit, his soul, the man that I know, everything about him that I know, the way he smells, the way he his sense of humor, his wit and his ability to discern information, all of these things that make him who he is as a person. I love those things. None of that would have happened, however, if I had not initially determined, is he worthy of my love? Now, unconditional love, true unconditional love, is opening up a phone book, running your finger down the list of names, and saying, okay, that one. And then whoever that person ends up being, you just love them. You love everything about them. You love who they are. That's not realistic. Men don't do that either. Men assess their partners too. They assess their partners far more quickly than women do. They do the what phase of that partner assessment far more quickly than women. Is she hot? Dude, no, really. Is she hot? Okay. And there's probably more to it than that. There's probably that, is she feminine? Would she be good mother? Is she going to be loyal to me? There's a lot of that runs under the surface, but the initial assessment is always, is she hot? Because that's the main thing men are looking for. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Men's big job is to impregnate physically and reproductively capable females. They have a gun with an unlimited supply of bullets, and all they got to do is go shooting that thing off as often as possible with as many possible partners as they can. Now, there's been some debate on whether or not humans are naturally monogamous, and I read some really interesting articles on that. And the funniest quote I can remember, I'm going to have to paraphrase, but it was basically that human males are designed to have 1.5 wives. So, we mostly tend to be monogamous, and that tends to be our most successful model. But if a guy can squeeze in another partner, he definitely will. So that's kind of how we're designed. We're kind of on that delicate knife's edge between monogamous and polyamorous. Polygamous, not polyamorous, polygamous, sorry. But no, I look at the differing concepts of love idea that Tomassi puts forward, and it always confuses me just a little. And I guess it's because I don't feel that the concept of love itself has been clearly defined enough for me to understand it. Now, Tomassi, in writing these books, he's writing them for men. I realize this, and he's speaking to his audience, which is men. I, not being a man, do not necessarily understand exactly what he's trying to get at, and it has been very perplexing for me, partially because of the relationship that I have with my husband, which is not based upon material, it's not based on resource exchange, it's definitely not based upon some sort of tit for tat system where I give him sex and he gives me money and a house and a roof over my head and food and all that. I really don't care. I mean, obviously I care about those things insofar as I need to obtain them in my life, but if he can't obtain them, then I will find a way to obtain them. That's just part of life, and that's just how I see the world. And part of this is because when I initially met my husband, I was more than capable of obtaining all my resources, all my necessary life resources, on my own without any help. And so the partnership that I formed with him was based entirely off of his companionship, his attractiveness, the sexual arousal that he generated in me, all these other details, which I think is something that feminists wish would happen, but it doesn't seem to happen nearly as often as feminists want to think that it does. And in the end, women are just lying to themselves and then ending up disappointed. Romance isn't created. Romance just happens, and it's a tough but valuable lesson when men come to realize that a happenstance bag of Skittles or a ring made from a gum wrapper in the right place at the right time meant more to a woman than every expensively contrived romantic getaway he'd ever thought would satisfy her need for lofty romance. This is also very true. My husband is not a flowers guy. The last time he brought flowers home, if I remember correctly, he brought them home because one of our daughters loves flowers. And so he brought home flowers for our daughter. He really doesn't tend to bring home flowers for me. I've never been a flowers kind of girl. I prefer a very relaxed, casual date night in our pajamas on the couch, watching a movie and eating popcorn, or even better, like chips. That's my ideal date night. I don't want to go out. I don't want to be somewhere fancy. Not that I don't appreciate going somewhere fancy from time to time, but I love hanging out on the couch, cuddling, eating some chips, watching a good movie together. Simple stuff. Simple. Simple with the right guy is always going to outweigh fancy and expensive with the wrong guy. Thanks mostly to men's blue pill conditioning, what men fail to ever consider is that women's hypergamic based love always considers what he is before she invests herself in who he is. Yes. Yes. Now, I do look back to the deep conversion idea, and I think that's a bigger detail than anyone seems to have made of it. I look at deep conversion, it's like that's clearly what's happened between my husband and I. That's clearly where we are. I assessed him for what he was. I determined that what he was attractive to me, and I fell very much in love with who he was. And so, reading books like Rational Male and Preventive Medicine, when men complain, well, why can't a woman just love me for who I am? It's like, well, I do. I love my husband for who he is. And it's like, well, that's because I already came to the conclusion that what he is, at the very core of his being, on all levels, is so hypergamically pleasing that I really don't have any lingering need to reassess him. There is no moment of, is he really the best I can do? It's like, yep, nope, he already jumped through that hoop. We're already good there. I don't need to go back and question that presupposition ever again. We know. We all know. He and I both know. He is exactly what I wanted. He is everything I ever wanted, plus some extra things that I didn't even know that I wanted or ever would want. He's everything. So there is no lingering doubt. There is no, is he really that? Is he really it? There is no secondary questioning. And I love him for who he is because we've already laid that groundwork. We've already determined that what he is everything I want. The funny thing that people keep asking me, that men keep asking me, is, well, what happens if he lost his job? It's like, well, I don't care. I mean, obviously it would create financial difficulties for us and we'd have to figure out how to make money to survive, but I don't care about his job. I'm proud of him when he makes accomplishments because I'm proud of him. And I'm happy for him and I'm pleased for his triumphs, you know. He's my closest friend and companion. So anything that makes him happy, anything that gives him pride and joy, that's something that gives me pride and joy as well. But do I love him based on his accomplishments? No, we've already determined that. We've already gone through that step. It ceases to be relevant. I've had men ask me, well, what if he lost his looks? It's like, okay, so what if he lost his job and his looks? He'd still have his personality. What if he lost his personality? Well, then he wouldn't be him anymore, would he? He wouldn't look like him. He wouldn't act like him. He wouldn't have the personality. What would be left? I mean, technically, if you gave him severe brain damage and turned him into a vegetable and had him on a ventilator, would I still love him? Well, yes, but at that point the relationship would be just a little bit unsustainable. And I mean, if he's on a ventilator and there's some chance that he can get off the ventilator at some point and start to rebuild his life, well, I'm there. I'm with him every step of the way. That's something we've already determined. But if he's just going to be stuck on the ventilator for the rest of his life and he's never getting off, well, he and I have both already talked about this. It's like, at some point you got to switch the machine off. Like, if there's nothing left of a person, do you still love them? Absolutely. But there's nothing left, So I think it's funny when people talk to me about, well, what if this got taken away from your husband? Well, what if he lost this attribute? Well, what if he lost that attribute? It's like, I would still love him, but how much do you shave off before there's nothing left? The internal psychology women evolved to vet men who displayed traits for both alpha physical prowess and parental investment provisioning potential are a result of children being a one directional priority for a woman's love. While a degree of maintaining a man's continued personal investment and commitment to the family unit requires her attentions in the form of sex and affections, a woman's primary love focus is directed towards children. I don't know about this. Like, yes and no. Children are extremely time consuming, energy consuming, resource consuming things in your life. And the procreative act is, ideally at least, a dual act. He contributed 50%, I contributed 50%. Between the two of us, 50% of our genetic material created 100% genetic material for a new being. And these new beings that we've created, we then are responsible for and are attempting to raise and provide for as best we can. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is a group effort. This is something he and I jointly decided to do, and we jointly entered into this massive undertaking together. And so, love, nurturance, energy, cuddling, affection, cooking, cleaning, bathing, all of these things that I'm doing for the kids, it's extremely energy intensive, and I'm the one who, for the most part, works directly and interacts directly with our offspring, which doesn't mean that he's not also interacting directly with our offspring to also contribute to their upbringing and well-being. So the two of us are both working at this project, but I tend to be much more hands-on, especially at the very early stages, because when they're tiny babies, I'm the one who's biologically designed to provide those things for them. The food, obviously, and the cuddling and the warmth and, sitting there changing their diapers. This is how women are designed. Are women designed to give their love to their children? Well, children are time intensive. So yes, we give a lot of energy and investment and relationship energy into our children. Does that mean that we don't have love for our husbands? Well, in my case, I look at it and it's like, well, yes, I still love my husband and I still invest in the relationship with my husband, because eventually these kids are going to reach adulthood, they're going to move out of the house, and all I'm going to have is the companion that I've been with through this process of creating offspring and raising those offspring. I need his continued companionship because eventually I'm going to want to spend time with him after the kids move out, and the two of us can continue our journey through life together after we've completed this very labor intensive, time intensive, energy intensive phase of our lives. And so the idea that women primarily love their children and don't have continued love and affection for their husbands, it's like, maybe this is the way women are designed. It just doesn't seem quite correct to me, and I struggle with this idea. I'm not sure I can convince myself that this is correct. Maybe in some women, just, they love the guy and then they have the baby and suddenly they just switch over to the baby. But for me, it's like, I love my offspring deeply, and I'm very invested in the well-being of my offspring. But I want to be with him too. This is my best friend. This is the man that I formed this deep companionship with, this lifelong bond. I'm going to work to maintain that relationship. Finally, we come to a male subdominant model wherein a man, by conditioning and circumstance, expects love from a woman as he would from a mothering dynamic. This goes back to Robert Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy, which I actually find myself thinking about more and more as I read these books. When I did that review, I remember thinking, I don't really get this. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of this review. I really don't know if I did a good job of that review. It wasn't a book that was written for me, so it was difficult for me to relate to. However, after reading that book, I go into this book, and I find myself thinking, okay, everything he talked about, I see in here. And this is something that I've wondered about, having read the earlier parts of this chapter. I found myself wondering, well, when he talks about love, when he talks about what men expect in terms of love from women, is he just talking about this mothering dynamic? Is he saying that men in today's society, with today's social expectations, have this idea that whatever woman they form a bond with is going to be nurturing to them in the way that their mother was? Because that's not exactly how it works out. And so, I mean, it's a little bit Oedipal, but I was wondering, because this is kind of the nice guy situation. The expectation of feminized men then becomes one of women adopting men's idealistic concept of love for love's sake, only to be gravely disappointed when they discover that women simply lack the capacity for it. Essentially, this model forces a woman not only to mother her children, but also her husband. And that's another thing I was thinking while reading this chapter, this idea that, women need to love men, or that men expect women to love them. And I'm like, well, what exactly do you mean by love? Because we have to, in order for me to understand this chapter in the way that Tomassi wrote it, in the way that Tomassi originally intended the words, I need to have an extremely clear definition of love in the terms he's using. I do not feel like I have a sufficient definition of love to understand large sections of this chapter. And when I was reading the chapter, I was wondering how much of the concept of love that men are seeking is not this Oedipal, mothering, nurturing love that you kind of hear about in No More Mr. Nice Guy, Robert Glover's book. How many of these men who expect women to love them in a certain way are not just expecting a mothering figure? And the women who resent men that they do have to mother, I can understand that resentment. I don't have to mother my husband. He is a self-sufficient human being. He is stronger than I am, smarter than I am, faster than I am. I don't have to care for him or tend to him for the most part. Like, he's injured himself. Like, one time I actually had to call 911 for him and have an ambulance come out and pick him up because he had injured himself. And, at that point I was trying to be very caring and nurturing to him because he was my partner and he was injured. And so, when we got him back from the hospital, I was trying to take care of him, and I was getting things for him and bringing food to him and caring for him as a human being would care for another human being who was injured and incapacitated. But at the same time, I don't see myself caring for him and mothering him, because it would invalidate the amount of power and strength he has in our relationship. It would throw off the hypergamic balance. And maybe that's what Tomassi is talking about, this idea that women need to love what a man is before they can love who he is. We had to determine that he was more powerful than I was before I could fall in love with him. That's hypergamy. That's how it works. That's part of the whole system. But having determined that he's more powerful than I am, number one, I'm not going to mother him. Number two, I look up to him. I treat him as a leader. I have respect and admiration for him. And I certainly don't resent him, so that's a good thing. That's kind of how we're all designed to fit together. Arguments about chores, money, sex life, and romance are most common in couples where the woman makes all or most of the family's decisions. Female decision-making status is an even stronger determinant of relationship dissatisfaction than female breadwinner status. Women can handle making more money in a relationship, but they despise being the leader in a relationship. This is very true. I talk about when my husband and I first met, when we first got together. He had just moved into our city. He was working some temp jobs, but he really hadn't settled in yet. I had been working as a dancer for a pretty long time at that point. I'd settled into an apartment, so I already had a place that I was living at. I had a nice, pretty steady, stable income at that point. It was more money than he was making, and so when he moved in, Like, he moved into my apartment because I already had one, and he didn't. And I remember telling him, the apartment is yours now. Because at first he was like, I don't know, I don't want to move into your apartment, that's your space. I was like, no, 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 it's yours. I live here now. And that was how things worked out with us. I made the money, and I would bring it home and I would give it to him because he's better with money than I am. I always had trouble paying the bills on time because I would forget. I can't keep a schedule very well. I'm working on it. I've gotten much better in the last decade, but at the time I was very bad at keeping track of a schedule. So I would bring home all the money and I would hand it off to him. And I remember when I was in the strip clubs working as a very young woman, I would hear all these stories about these women who, oh my God, she's got this drug dealer boyfriend and she goes to work and she earns all this money and then she hands it over to him and he takes it all and she doesn't see a cent of it and it's just this really bad setup. And it was like, I started doing that with my husband right away, and it's like, technically this is a bad thing, but we're going to get married. I'm going to marry this man. And he's better with money than I am, and the money is going to us. It's not my money, it's our money. And so throughout our entire relationship, like, any money that gets earned, he's the decision maker on that money. And I like it better that way because I know the bills are going to get paid on time. And if I was the decision maker on that money, the lights would be flickering out because I forgot to pay the electric bill, and all of a sudden it's like, well, crap, we're without power. I forgot. My bad. I'm sorry. I just forgot. And so that's it for this chapter. I really liked it. I've been wanting to have a better understanding of Tomassi's men's definition of love versus women's definition of love. I still don't feel like it's been clearly defined enough for me to have a very solid idea inside my head of what exactly he means by that. I look at it and I wonder if he's not talking about this no more Mr. Nice Guy kind of definition of love, this almost Oedipal idea of love. And maybe that's what he's talking about. Maybe that's not what he's talking about. I don't feel like I can tell for certain. However, to all of you gentlemen who are out there thinking, well, maybe women simply aren't capable of love, I guarantee you, at least one of us is. And I'm not that far of an outlier that there aren't other women like me running around in the world. I'm unusual, but I'm not that unusual. I'm pretty sure that there are a substantial number of women in the world. Maybe not all women, and maybe not the majority of women, but there is a substantial number of women in this world who are capable of falling in love and genuinely loving a man throughout a lifetime together. Anyway, that's it. I hope you guys had a wonderful week, and I will talk to you guys later.